Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to the MIT Comes to the West Coast annual event. Today we've got 73 of the greatest first-year MBAs we've had this year. And I was going to introduce you, but if you want, no. Do you want the dramatic entrance or not? So we have 73 new MBAs here, and I'm going to try to go through the countries, and I'm going to forget them. But before we do, my name is Bill Ollett. I run the Martin Trust Center for MIT Entrepreneurship. And every night you should say Martin Trust Center for MIT Entrepreneurship before you go to bed. And if you want me to say it, just give as much as Martin Trust did, and I will say it as well. But anyway, I want to make an announcement today that's important. As all of you students know, and many of you are graduates, the entrepreneurs in residence play an important role at MIT to help make the experience what it is. We feel we have, and I'm very confident at this point, is good, if not better, experience for entrepreneurship than any place in the world. And it's a lot has to do with working with people who have been entrepreneurs. When you come into our center, you're greeted by people, but there's at least 3 people there who have started companies and gone through, how do you make payroll? What happens if you miss payroll? What happens when you fight with a founder and there are irreconcilable differences? All that kind of stuff. And today is the first day for our newest EIR, Nick Meyer. Would you please stand up, Nick? And Nick, you never know what's coming, Nick. And Nick has been a multiple entrepreneur. He has been out here on the West Coast. He went through Y Combinator. He's very involved in that program, and he's going to come back to be in Kendall Square with us and put stakes full time. So that's very good news for us, and it will help bridge us between East Coast and West Coast. So now let's go back to our other guests here. We have alumni here. Those alumni, can you raise your hands? Look at them. What a learned, distinguished crew. We're very glad to have you here, and thank you for all the support that you provide. Our students have been blessed by coming out here and being able to meet with many companies. We went to one called Space today, and the CEO was Summit. And he just brought 4 people into the room, and it was extraordinary because he said, this is the one place in your life where you're going to be the closest to average because everyone in the room is at MIT. And it was, and he really meant it, and it was very special. And they went around and talked about what it meant to be from MIT. So we may not be the best dressed people in the world, we might have the best haircuts, but damn, we know how to get stuff done. So thank you for your support. Now, the 73 MBAs, first-year MBA. Oh, by the way, do we have newly admitted people to MIT here? New admits. Are you here? No. That's not a good sign. Maybe there's another reception going on. But I just want to talk about the students who are here. 73 students, first-year MBAs, extraordinary people, all of them, from countries around the world, from not just the United States, Canada, where else? Brazil, Egypt, Israel, Spain, China, Singapore, Italy, Nigeria. Tajikistan, is that? I always get that one wrong. What is it, Tajikistan? Yes. What else did I leave out? Italy, we got Italy. Venezuela, Colombia. Taiwan. Portugal. France. So anyway, it's a spectacular class. And every year it just amazes me to see the quality of the people. Our admissions are up over 30% for MIT Sloan. There's no other school out there that's seeing things like that. So MIT Sloan has come the place to be. And I just want to point out one of them. Where's Sam? Sam, can you stand up? Yes, Sam. So this is, I won't put you on the spot too much. But today, and he introduced himself, and this guy went to Dartmouth, and he was on the lumberjack team at Dartmouth. I didn't even know that there were such teams. And he was telling the story how he competes against McGill University with their, what are they, the human?
Yeah, so it's like a D1 sport in Canada. The Canadians keep their axes and humidors to make sure they're pressurized properly. And they go on national television, so that was my fun fact.
So just when you think you've seen it all, along comes Sam, the lumberjack from Dartmouth. So all I tell you is, please, after this, we're going to have a great guest speaker, but please go around and get to meet the wonderful people here, because at MIT, we really want to build a network of people. And it's not as powerful as other schools because we're a lot less formal, but let's try to change that by helping each other out. Because I always say the law of the jungle from Rudyard Kipling says, the strength of the pack is in the wolf. That means a pack is strong because the wolves are strong. But the strength of the wolf is in the pack. So if we can make a stronger pack, it helps all of us to change the world. And that's what we want to do. So with that profound thought from a kid's book, we'll move on to the program. All right, so our guest tonight, oh, by the way, if you notice these two things, see how this was not designed by MIT, this was designed by Stanford. And you can see this chair is much higher. So, but we fix problems at MIT. So, we don't care what it looks like either. All right, so our guest tonight is Stephanie Fohn. Stephanie is a seasoned startup executive and entrepreneur who specializes in leading emerging technology companies and bringing products and services to market. In 2013, Forbes recognized her as one of the 11 women executives leading high-growth private companies, and she has also received a Stevie Award for Women of the Year in Technology. Stephanie was CEO of White Hat Security, better than Black Hat Security, for sure, for a decade during a period of exceptional growth, taking the company from 8 employees to 300. Most recently, as CEO, she positioned Remotium within the rapidly evolving mobile virtualization market for a successful acquisition in only 8 months, selling the company to Avast Software in June 2015. Please join me in welcoming Stephanie Fohn from the MIT Sloan class of 1988. I don't think you'll need your name tag.
No, I'm going to hide that. For a minute there, I didn't think I was going to get to talk.
Well, that's what kind of happens in my classroom, Stephanie.
Okay, I'm hiding this.
But we'll give you plenty of time to talk.
Oh, no. I shouldn't have even said that. Okay. Just kidding.
No, we like to trade insults. So, well, first of all, welcome, and we're honored to have you here. And why don't you just go back to, I always find it interesting is to find out where people started. Tell us about where you grew up, your family, how you ended up, in college, and then your path from college to MIT. How's that for an open-ended question?
Okay. Yes. Okay. This is where I say that I grew up a poor. No. I actually did grow up in a reasonably small town in central Washington, ag-based, so where we grow apples and hops and cherries, called Yakima. And it was a place that many kids didn't go to college. And so I was one of the fortunate few. I had a very smart older sister, and she went to the University of Washington in Seattle, and I followed her there. And when I got to the UW, and I was in classes with 750 people, And I was taking, a double load and getting A's and everything. Then I finally figured out that I might be smart, right? I might be smart. And so I started to apply myself and graduated with a couple of degrees, a degree in business and a degree in psychology as well. And then I went to work for Chevron, the oil company. They would recruit all up and down the West Coast. And I was very interested in the intersection between business and technology, even back then. Though, again, didn't have an engineering degree, but, I focused on IT in the business school. And so while I was there at Chevron, I was in their management development program and made my way to IT audit. And, but when I was there, I always knew that I was going to go back to grad school. And so I applied to a lot of graduate schools and got into a lot of graduate schools and chose the Sloan School, chose MIT. And for me, it was really because of that interest in how technology and business intersect. So that's really what brought me to Sloan. So I will not go into any more detail there.
Wait, we got to know. You're not an oldest child. Are you a youngest child?
Middle child.
All right.
Middle child. I was the hard worker. That was me.
Beautiful.
My sister was the brain, my brother was the jock. I was the hard worker. So.
Often neglected.
Exactly.
By the way, if you have questions, please, you don't have to wait. Just tweet them to this hashtag, and I'll pick them up when we get to that part of the program. So you end up at, you've come from, when you were working for Chevron, where were you working? Where were you based out of?
I was based in the Bay Area, so I got recruited and came down the Bay Area.
So you're in the Bay Area?
Bay. Yeah, in the East Bay.
And you end up going back to MIT.
Yeah.
So you spent 2 years at MIT Sloan. What did you do between your first and second year?
Let's see if I can remember that far back.
1989.
I worked for HP up in Andover.
So you stayed on the East Coast?
Yes,
right?
I did, yeah.
But then when you were done, you beeline back out here?
Yeah, I came back out here.
Now, why is that?
Well, it's one of those long stories, but it was, let me see, I was married at the time to my first husband, and he was really the one that drove the move back to the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. So, but I like the West Coast. So it was something that was important to me as well.
So, that the students are out here to understand the ecosystem out here.
Right.
And, the West Coast. And let's talk a little bit about that, because what's it like out here that's different than the East Coast?
So first of all, and it's amazing when you do these things, and then you have these bright lights. So basically, I can't see any of you. It's just a mass of people, like there, I can see you. So one of the reasons why I went to work for Chevron is I came down to the Bay Area and I fell in love with San Francisco as a city. So, Chevron likes to do that. They recruit people. You come down for these visits and they put you up at the St. Francis, in a nice suite, in downtown. And it was just so glamorous, and the city is such a wonderful place. So I really fell in love with San Francisco. So that was a big draw for me. I think that having spent so many years here, so basically I've spent my entire adult life in the Bay Area, except for the time I spent at MIT, I realized that we have, just an incredibly thriving, ecosystem for entrepreneurs. And that's something that you can, get in, smaller ways in a lot of different places. And there's a lot of computer security entrepreneurs that, there's Beltway companies, Minneapolis, Seattle, San Diego, right? There's different pockets, obviously, Boston. But the Bay Area is the place to be, basically, from my perspective, if you want to start a company or build a company. It's because of the resources and the environment, the people, the attitudes are so much, geared toward entrepreneurialism.
But what they, Northern California is different now. San Francisco is much different than the peninsula, right? Silicon Valley is different than San Francisco, is it not?
Well, I consider it to be one big ecosystem, right? So I lived in San Francisco for 10 years, and now I'm down in the valley. I'm in Menlo Park. And really, when you're looking to start a company, sometimes you look in San Francisco. Sometimes you look mid-peninsula so that you can draw, people, talent from the South Bay as well as San Francisco and everywhere in between. But the funders are generally the same, right? So you get the funders, the financial partners, generally come from Sand Hill Road. Certainly there's a lot of VCs now that are in the city. But yeah, I don't see any difference really between the two. And I would love to hear your thoughts on why you think it's different.
Well, having spent so much time out here.
Yes.
I just arrived here last night. No, what we hear from our students is that San Francisco, is the place to be. And that's more of the heavier technology is down more in the valley, the more enterprise stuff. But even now you're seeing Okta and some of these other ones in San Francisco. And that's the cooler place to be now than down in Palo Alto region, down the peninsula.
Okay. Well, that's good. It's good to keep in mind.
Okay. Hypothesis tested, not proven true. So let's get to some of the other things. As the computer security area is really something you've done very well in, and is an area of great concern. We visited a company today called Space, and they're just on fire with what they're doing, and they're talking about the opportunities in this area, and they're saying, this is fundamental, and Bill Swanson, this has become over and over again. You hear this, everybody who in the IT area needs to be concerned about security. Do you buy into that or hypothesis?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
So what advice would you give to people today?
So are you talking about advice to people with respect to entrepreneurs that want to develop products? Should they care about security, or whether entrepreneurs should specifically focus on developing security products?
It would be both. It could be both. But what I was really focused on is security is not something that's separate anymore. That's the takeaway I took from it. Is he was saying the product managers are calling up. It used to be there was a security group in the company, right? At this major company that called up, and he said, "It's a product manager." He said, "Why are you speaking to me?" He said, "Because I can't release my product unless I get it, unless I deal with these security threats."
That's good. That's good. It sounds like they are farther along than many, right? And so it sounds like they're very progressive in this area. But it is true. So when I started in security in the mid-90s, it was, basically a well-kept secret, right? And it was just the beginnings of the web, right? And communicating via the internet. And so this industry has grown in importance over the years. And it started out that people were focused on the network and the infrastructure. Then people realized, very quickly that it's the applications also provide attack vectors, right? Web apps, regular applications, known code, customized code. And then obviously every time there's a new platform, now being, mobile being very important, as well as IoT, is that security really needs to be built into every layer, right? You need to be thinking about security from the very beginning, and that security is not something that the IT guys do to keep you from using your devices, right? It's not something bad, but it is something that enables business, right? And that's something that's been a big shift over the years. And obviously from an entrepreneur standpoint, from someone who has focused on developing solutions in this area, it's just phenomenal that it's gone from being a disenabler to basically a business enabler. So it's very important.
So while we're scanning it, there's the rapidly evolving mobile virtualization market. Can you tell us what that means?
Yes. Okay, so we can, we'll talk about the rest of my background later, but most recently, I was CEO of a company called Remotium, and it's a computer security play. It's a mobile security play, but it's security through virtualization. So you have your device, right? But all of the applications and the data, they don't sit on the device, they sit on the server because everything is virtualized. And so if you lose your phone, if it gets compromised, if anything happens to it, it doesn't matter because there's nothing that sits there on the phone. And that's something that Remotium does, and we do in a very unique way. And there are other players in the space, but it is a new space, which is why there's room for small companies. But it's not too dissimilar from what Citrix does. You know, they virtualize Windows desktop environments, right? And it's just moving that to mobility, and also enabling granular controls as well within applications. So with Remotium, it was a great situation. I came in post-seed, pre-A, was a really tight, strong technical team. And the technology founder, CEO, brought me in, and then he moved to the product role. And he and I worked very closely together. We were out raising the Series A when we got an inbound offer from Avast Software. They're one of the antivirus companies out of Eastern Europe, or Central Europe. They're based in Prague. Very strong company. And they were looking to really focus in mobility, and so we became their enterprise mobility play. And so it worked out really well. It was a short stint for me, but it was a great outcome.
It was, what, 8 months?
Yeah, 8 months, from November to June.
So had you raised your A by then? Or was this?
No, we were out there.
So you went directly from seed to sale?
Seed to sale, yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. I would recommend it highly. Yeah,
because one of the catches is when you get into Series A and you bring in a big name VC, they have these things called preferred shares, which if all of a sudden someone comes to buy you,
right,
they say, no. And you say, yes. And they say, no, read the preferred shares, we're blocking it. And you say, but this is a good deal. And they say, no, we want to get 100x our money. 10x isn't good enough for us.
Yeah.
And
and there was a professional VC, Draper Nexus, was in.
Oh, really?
Right, with the preferred, yeah. So we did have professional VC management.
So who from Draper Nexus?
It was Rio.
Rio?
Yeah.
Okay, because we have two of the Drapers in tomorrow,
okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Who is it that we have, Nina?
Rio. What?
Tim and Adam Draper or something.
Oh, okay. So Draper Fisher Jurvetson has, the broader global. So Draper Nexus is one of the DFJ funds. Mm-hmm. So and it's Rio Maeda and Mitch Kitamura, and they have a lot of Japanese LPs, and so they do cross-border stuff with Japan. So good folks. But that is a good point, because it is, I'm a big believer in early exits, actually, because of the dilution that comes with continuing to raise, right? The more you raise, the more dilution you take. And also you really have to be careful who you partner with, right? I think everyone sitting in this room, I'm sure, knows that, but you really have to be careful. And you don't always have more than one choice, right? And so it's a risk that you take.
And that's interesting because it seems out here in Silicon Valley, over and over again, people say, here's how much money I've raised, here's how much money I've raised, as if that's a measure of success.
Yeah, exactly.
And yet you're running counter to that
Yeah.
in what
And-
you say. You're sounding very East Coast.
Well, it's funny, and also with our wonderful unicorns, right? I
Yeah.
raised this much money. These guys I know well that raised, Ron Gula from Tenable raised $250 million in a round. And the valuation wasn't disclosed, but it had to have been well over $1 billion, right? And so, yeah, that's a marvelous thing until you want a real exit, right? And
Yeah.
that's what's happening now in the marketplace. So there's this huge shakeout because, these companies that have been funded at these high valuations, they're not worth that. And they're not going to be able to go public anytime soon at those types of valuations. So it becomes a huge problem.
Yeah.
Say one other thing too. There's another company I know that shall remain nameless. That's a company in our space, in white hat space and security, and they took a round at a high valuation, and they're ready to go public, but they can't because now that valuations have come down, they can't get the valuation that they need to get the last guy in has to get his return. And sometimes now the growth equity or private equity players that come in at the very end will take ratchets and things like that. So they want to make sure that they have their return at IPO, and if you can't give them that return, then you're stuck. Mm-hmm. And so that's not a good place to be.
So I'm going to come back to that with role models. But we have a question from Durga, and I'm just going to read this off the Twitter. He says, how much did you sell Remotium for?
There you go. So the value is not disclosed.
Okay.
But let's say that the funders made about 3 times their money, and they had been in just about a year, and all of the founders were millionaires plus. So I did my job. Thank you very much.
So I want to come back to this. Like you were saying something, and the power of role models. And someday I want to write this article, the damage Mark Zuckerberg has done to entrepreneurship, because everybody thinks Mark Zuckerberg is a role model for entrepreneurship, and I'm not pouring haterade on Mark Zuckerberg. I'm just saying that's like saying, LeBron James is an example of how to be a basketball player. He's a statistical outlier of kind of an individual that happened in one time and space. And it's more often when you look at the research that's done, that things are done in teams and collaborations with heterogeneous teams that come about.
Right.
And that's what we teach at MIT Sloan. We teach the more systematic way. Mm-hmm. So after that ad,
yes.
Can you, if you had to take a role model that you said has really not been a good role model for other people, are you willing to go there? No.
Why not do it the other way?
Well, I'm going to do that next. All right, so let's go. Let's be nice.
I mean, I can certainly talk about people that have made mistakes, but yeah, I don't.
Yeah. So let's go to the positive side. Who would you pick as a role model then of how this is what we should look at going forward? This is, if you want to optimize your odds to be a successful entrepreneur, mm-hmm. Look at this role model.
Okay. Look at this role model. Okay, well, we'll start with Art Wong, who none of you know. See, this is my thing, is that my role models are going to be within the security industry. I suppose I could, look beyond that, but again, the security industry is my world, right? The Valley too, but really specifically the security industry. And Art Wong was a very successful entrepreneur 3 times in a row, and he always started with core teams, and his focus was, and the reason why I mentioned it is his focus was making, those core teams all a lot of money, right? And that was his idea of success, not just that investors would make money, but that, everyone would make money. And of course, we would build products that have value, right? And that are important and that people buy and want to use. But that was really his focus. And he worked well with his teams. He gave them autonomy. And I was a member of his team at Security Focus. And he was a believer also in early exits, a believer in serial entrepreneurship. And it's okay. You don't have to be the next Google to be a success. And if you grow, like with Security Focus, we grew the company to about 75 people. We were doing 8 million, and we were on track to do 8 million in revenue. And we sold to Symantec. This was in 2002. And, made great return for the investors. The team made money. It was very successful. And we sold it was sub 100 million, but it was a very, very successful exit. Now, there's certain venture firms that would not even have invested in the company because that wasn't a big enough exit. And actually in the late 90s and even in the early 2000s, that was a reason why a lot of the VCs stayed away from security, was because a lot of the exits were sub 100 million at the time. But still, you can have a great successful run and then you can do it again. And Art so far has done it 3 times. Now he's running the services business for HP. So now he's got a big job for a while, but I think he'll come back to it.
So what were his 3 companies? You just named one of them.
So Secure Networks, they created one of the first vulnerability scanners. They sold to Network Associates. It's called the Ballista Scanner. And then Security Focus, which I teamed with him and a smaller group of folks. And then the most recent one was Iron Key, which is another successful security company.
So you took a company from 8 employees to 300 employees. Mm-hmm. That's scaling a company. Yeah. And it's interesting because we have a lot of companies now. We just have a new class called Scaling Entrepreneurial Ventures, where we now have this, people are becoming entrepreneurs and they create a company, it gets up to like 10 employees. But going from 10 to 300, that's a big deal. That requires not just entrepreneurial passion, that requires some management skills. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How did you do, can you get into some of the key things as to how you did that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so again, it took time. I was with White Hat. The company was founded in 2002. So again, it was kind of right after the crash of the 90s, I guess we'll call it now. And so it was a tough time in terms of finding talent and getting funding. I joined the company when there was 8 people, and that was in mid-04, and then grew the company from there. And over time, I raised over 50 million, 50 million in funding, and grew the company from, and again, I can kind of say verbally, it's not something I can put on paper because the company is still a private company, but grew from, we were like 250,000 in revenue to almost 40 million. And so in security, you need to break through. You sell first to the early adopters, but there's a lot of companies that never make it more than about 10 million in revenue, maybe 10 to 15. And so it was nice to have broken through, that plateau and really been able to grow the company to a larger size. And I think the key things really, and this is why I like to do it, right? So this is why I'm an entrepreneur, and the reason why I do what I do is I'm not a technology visionary, but what I like to do is come in when there is a small team, less than 10 people, and that's consistent throughout my career, right? Remotium, White Hat, Security Focus, and even prior to that, Tripwire. Coming in when the team is very small, and coming in as CEO, that's when all the creativity happens. That's when the fun happens. I may not be the one that has the idea for the product, but I'm the one that gets to decide, what does that product look like? Who's going to buy it? How do we go to market? How do we position the company? And when I say it's certainly not just me, right? But I get to lead that process. And that's something that's just a pleasure to me. And I think it's the most exciting time in any company's life, are those early days. Now, obviously, what happens as a company grows over time is you adjust and you get to go through these processes more than once, right? And maybe it's incremental, but you get to look at your existing product and then you say, okay, how can I complement it with another product? Or we're going to market directly. Maybe we can open up a channel. Should we try to take this down market and sell it to SMBs? Do we develop a freemium model, right? So that people can use this and try before they buy. And then you can get a grassroots type of go-to-market strategy where people will adopt on their own and the product will grow from there, the product adoption. So it really is an exciting time. And so the key things are to build a good team, and then once you've built that team, and obviously that evolves over time, I'm really scrunching down too, because I'm trying to get under the lights. I feel like I'm scrunching down. I'll sit up here like this. You have to let them go, right? And I think that culture is so important. And one of the things that I think I'm known for is having a very low ego, right? And I don't have to be the smartest person in the room, and generally I'm not, so that's easy. But basically I'm considered, a team member like anyone else. And in the end, oftentimes I have to make the hard decisions, but I run a very collaborative shop, right? And I think that's just so important because those people are there for the same reason I am. It's because they want to create things. They want to utilize their talents. And so you've got to let them do their job, right? And that's really fun. And then I think that it's just important always to, as I mentioned, you have to keep adjusting. So that's what running a business is about, right? It's never create your 5-year business plan and then execute on it, right? It never happens that way. The world changes, and the most successful companies are the ones that can change with it, right? So.
Keep the questions coming in. I have one from Teddy Lee that says, Stephanie, how did you select your post-MBA job, and how do you suggest we go about picking a startup in today's job landscape?
It's a good question. So, actually, when I got out of Sloan, I didn't go right into a startup. I had a path, and it would be probably behoove me to talk about that a little bit. I told you I went to Sloan because I was interested in the intersection, right, between IT and business. And so, I was determined, to go into IT consulting. That's what I wanted to do. And it made sense, right, follow my path. And then, of course, when we got to the second year, I'm sure this is something that has continued over the years, but when I graduated, venture capital was the hot area to get into. And I talked to a company that we would call a private equity firm today. Back then, they were doing mezzanine equity investing and leverage buyouts. And talked to that company, and I got, so enamored with the idea of, working in that field that I just abandoned all my plans. And in hindsight, I think it was the right choice because, so I went to work for this firm. It was called Berkeley Gavette. We were in the pyramid in '89 when the earthquake happened. So, right there in downtown San Francisco. Great firm. I got to see a lot. In that kind of world, you get to see a lot. And I got to see basic businesses. And I learned financial engineering is what I call it. And obviously, LBOs are all about financial engineering. And I learned how to, understand how the numbers, the financial statements reflect, how they reflect what's going on in the business. And that was a very important lesson for me to learn. But what I did is I stayed with Berkeley Gavette in that area, and then I joined a couple of colleagues of mine that spun out and had their own investment banking firm called Alliant Partners, and joined them for a couple of years. And then we did an M&A with a woman named Marketo Silveira, who was in the voice services business. And she sold her company to MCI, and then she got tapped to be CEO of a startup called Pilot Network Services. And she pulled me over, and she pulled me over as her director of business development. And that's really what moved me into the operating side. And but having that exposure to lots of different companies at a very high level, and having to actually analyze entire segments and technology segments very quickly, it was good. It was good experience.
So this one comes from Lampaki. Among your ideas and interests, what's your process for deciding which company to pursue next? How do you choose?
Yeah, that's a great one too. Okay. So, since I'm going through that process right now, it's very relevant. So I think that for me, again, it's very important that I find, a strong technology team to work with. And it could be that my next gig, I'll think of something on my own and will actually, start it from the very beginning. But that's less likely than that I will find, a core team and come in and work with that team. And so, and really this has happened, 3 times, because I would include Security Focus in that as well. You have to find a first-time technology entrepreneur that's willing to say, hey, I really want to build a great product, but that fundraising stuff and all that go-to-market stuff, I'm going to let you do it, right? And I think it's not that easy to find, right? Because entrepreneurs, by definition, right, we're all control freaks, right? So I think that's just a huge factor for me. And I've been very fortunate that I've been able to find teams where this could happen, and I could come in and be a key part of the team from the very beginning, and not be seen as an outsider. Does that make sense?
So how did you find them? That really is a needle in a haystack. Yeah. Because finding a founder that's been successful and gotten it from 1 to 10 people and then says, well, I'm looking for a business person to give the lead role to. Well, it's usually an ego problem. Yeah. It's a control ego problem.
Exactly.
How do you find these people? This is very, very interesting. And you've not done it once. You've not done it twice.
Yeah, done it 3
You've done it 3+ times.
And again, with Security Focus, I was COO, and Art was our CEO, so a slightly different situation, but did have similarities. And with Security Focus, I was brought in by it's all relationships. It has been. And I was brought in by a colleague of theirs who's the VP of marketing. We knew each other, and he thought that I would be a good fit for the role. White Hat, it was a little different. It was the investors that were pushing. So the technology entrepreneur had gotten the company started, had raised about $1 million, and thought that if they built it, they would come, right? And so really didn't have an idea of how difficult it is to bring products to market, especially in the security industry. And so I knew someone who knew, one of their investors. And so they brought me in. But again, in that situation, even though the investors brought me in, it wasn't a negative, right? It was seen by that technology entrepreneur that I could come in and help, and that it would be the right thing to do. And then finally with Remotium, it was really through a relationship, CEO of another company, and he said, hey, yeah, maybe you can help those guys. And I started out advising them, and then ended up coming in as CEO.
So it has a lot to do with your reputation too.
Yes.
And people, it's word of mouth, which,
Yes, exactly.
which so often happens.
In,
is
in
you-
its relationships. And again, in security, it's a very small world. It really
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
It's not like you put a cover letter together and sent it out to a bunch of people.
No.
They called you
Not
up.
gonna work. Yeah.
This one comes from Dennis Lawley, and it says, "You're team-oriented and clearly a winner."
Where is he?
Well done, Dennis. Well done. How do you identify and hire other great team players and winners?
Yeah, yeah.
He's available after.
Obviously. So yeah, I think that also comes down to relationships, and that's one of the reasons why, I feel like at this point in my career, my highest and best use, right, is staying in security, because I know a lot of people. But it also is, getting out there and getting to know people, and leveraging your existing relationships to meet new people. And I think, again, in the Valley, it really can be tough, because right now, it's really hard to find good talent, right? And especially, on the software development side and things like that. So it's getting so competitive, and there's a lot of companies out there, scrabbling, for the great teams. So yeah, so I wish I had some magic advice, in terms of doing that, but it's really just putting yourself out there and getting to know as many people as possible and building your networks.
So I have to jump you, Justin, for a second here, because Lisa Taco, is that a Norway flag in the background, Lisa? Lisa, where are you? Is that a Norway flag in the back? She's from Florida, so we don't understand why there's a Norway flag in the back. Oh, there you are. Entrepreneurship is tough and risky. How do you decide when to make the plunge with an idea or venture? This is very, very common, and you probably remember your days. Well, there's a lot of pressure now. You have 73 people majoring in entrepreneurship and innovation.
Right.
And there's like this, I want to do a startup. Why can't I do a startup? I don't seem to have an idea. Or is this a good enough idea that I should make the plunge or not?
Yeah, exactly. So, I have to say that I'm glad that actually, I can't say that, because even when I came out of grad school, I never would have been an entrepreneur straight out. So I didn't have that much, self-confidence at the time, to be honest with you. So for me, it was a journey that got me to the right place, right, to what I love. So, it was an important journey. And so for those of you that feel ready now, I'm an angel investor. No, just kidding.
You won't get out of here if you say that.
I would still recommend, and I know most of you have already had work experience, but I think it makes sense to actually work for someone first, and then you can, maybe it's in product management, maybe it is in a startup, or maybe it's in a medium-sized firm, or maybe it's in a big company, but you learn, right? You learn things on somebody else's dime, right? And so I'd say that even though that's not what you want to hear, right, that there's something to be said, about, getting that foundation behind you. If you have a great idea you think is great, what you want to do is bounce it off of other people, basically. Now, again, that's risky if it's just an idea, but that today it is very rare that companies get funded, right, off of the back of the napkin, right? And so generally today, seed funding occurs after, there's at least enough of a product developed to demonstrate. And so, kind of the A has become the new B and seed has become the new A, right? And so you'll do a seed, but you have to have something there. You can't just say, hey, I got this great idea. Now, not that it doesn't happen occasionally, but you shouldn't expect that it happens. So, so there's a lot of work that is going to go into developing an idea, getting the product to kind of a demo stage before you can, try to raise money. And then obviously before you raise your A, you've got to have, today you've almost got to have market validation, right? You've got to have a dozen customers that are paying you before you can raise your A. So, so it's quite different than it was even, 5 to 8 years ago. So I'm getting really good at not answering the question. Do you see how I'm doing that? I tell a story. And
you should run for president. But I think, can we have time for one more question, Lauren? Okay. So there's a lot of these questions, and I'm going to use Maddie Wasser's one, and I think this gets to it. I mean, a lot of people here want to get into a startup, but they're not founders yet. I mean, that's one of the reasons why they came to Sloan, and the magic doesn't happen that quickly, as you know.
Exactly.
And so joining a startup, your story is very interesting to a lot of people here. So Maddie asks, can you discuss coming in as an, quote, outsider at an early stage and how you handled differences in opinions you had with the founders?
Yeah.
That's a real issue, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And, again, I've been fortunate, but I'm also a pretty good communicator. And so both with Remotium and with White Hat, in both cases where I came in as the CEO, I spent a lot of time with the founding CEOs in each of those cases, a lot of time. And I remember having conversations with Sinan. It's like, hey, do you really need me? You don't need me. Why, you've got to make sure you need me. And how can we make this work? And what is it, where do you want to go with this company? And what are your goals? And so, and the same with Jeremiah Grossman at White Hat. And again, it was a little different situation. I think Jeremiah had, at the time, really, this was, he didn't have a choice. It was just a matter of whom. But it was really important to me to have, a connection and make sure that we talked through the issues. You don't wait until you're there and then say, okay, now let's figure this out, right? Communication is everything, right? So, how's that? You
were a psychology major in college. How much did that come into play here?
Yeah. So, I'm so glad I get to segue back to this because I forgot to say it at the beginning. I've always been, entrepreneurial, right? So I was the kid that was out, with the lemonade stand, every day. And I remember making popsicles and, all this little stuff when I was a kid. And so I was always the entrepreneur, right? And though I didn't know it, right? I didn't know what that meant at the time. And so when I got to school, I gravitated toward business, right? It made perfect sense. Made a pass through economics and said, nah, it's not gonna work. So I went to business, but I found that I gravitated towards psychology classes. And so I ended up, in my third year with, really enough psychology credits to get a degree. And it was just really that I loved it so much. And I find, obviously, that it is very important, right? Understanding people and what motivates them, because different people are motivated by different things. And when you're growing a company, you want to motivate everyone in the right way as much as you can. And so, again, psychology is just something that I enjoy, that's easy for me. But I think it's something that's critical. It's all about people, in terms of growing companies. And so it was important to me. It's served me well.
I know I said that was going to be the last question, but
it's okay.
We can change the rules. We're entrepreneurs.
Yep, here.
So this, I will try to make the last question. It says this is Mekubia. Okay, who is that? Okay, so he said, looking back on your days at Sloan, what's one thing you would have done differently? And let's think about not just a regret. What's one thing you did that put you in the position you are today? And let's start with that. Let's start with what you would have done differently, and then end with the positive. All right? I was not a psychology major, just to be clear.
There you go. Okay.
Let's end on the positive note. But what would you have done differently looking back, knowing what you know now?
Okay.
You had 2 years.
Yes, exactly.
Do you remember the courses?
Yes, I'm just trying to think of which is the most politically correct answer.
No, not here.
No.
Not here.
So, how about I'll say two things. I have all kinds of things I would have done differently. So, one is that I ended up for my thesis. I got funded through Draper Labs, Charles Stark Draper Labs. Any representatives here in the room?
But by the way, just to note, there was no MBA back in 19.
Yeah,
then.
it was an MS.
It was a Master's of Management, and you had to do a thesis.
Yes. You guys don't have to do theses anymore?
No, it's gotten soft. These are millennials. These are millennials here. Enough about me. What do you think about me?
Oh, man. So I ended up doing my thesis, and basically I set out to get that last semester paid for by somebody, and then did my thesis with Draper. And I ended up something about strategic planning and not-for-profits in technology or something like that. And it really wasn't something that I had that much interest in. It was that relevant, but the money was relevant at the time. So, so if I had to do differently, and if I'd had the money, I would do it differently. So I think in that case, the thesis was actually a good thing, because if you really focused on something that you loved, a topic that was really of interest to you, that it was something that could be very meaningful, but it wasn't for me. And then finally, I would have talked more. Yeah, so I was shy. Yes, I was. Hard to believe at this point. But I was very shy and didn't speak up a lot. And, I think that Sloan, did a great job of bringing people out. And, there's a lot of group work that we did. But, I was a shrinking violet in those days. So it's different now.
On the positive note, if you look back, what was one thing now that you say, wow, that really helped me?
Yeah. Again, a couple of things, but I don't know, does Bill Pound still have his course? No, he doesn't anymore. Okay. So he had this course where you put together...
Wait, how many people know the name Bill Pounds here?
Yeah. Okay, I'm dating myself. Sorry. How about Tom Pounds? He went to school with me.
Yeah, Tom Pounds, yeah.
Yeah. He was in that class with us. But he was in my class. But anyway, so Bill Pounds had a course where you actually broke into groups, and you were like management teams, and you had to present a strategic plan to a board. And so that was great. It was role playing, basically. You had to come up with a strategic plan, and they would set parameters, right? It wasn't something that we made up completely. There was parameters set, and we worked together to put it all together, and then we presented to an executive who would come in, and I'm trying to remember who it was, but it was like the CEO or an SVP of a very large company, and came in, and we pitched him on this idea, and it was terrifying at the time, and of course, then now I do it all the time, right? And so that was good training. And then also I think we did a lot of project work, which was good. Worked together in groups, and it was something that I didn't have that much experience with, and so that was a good thing.
Well, Stephanie, thank you. Stephanie came back and was a judge in the 100K competition. Mm-hmm. And for those of you who want to get someone, she gives back. Who was clapping for the 100K? A lot of love for the 100K. All right. and we really appreciate that. And for those of you for other things, she's a terrific resource. She's given up. She has two 9-year-old
Twins.
Twins.
Yeah, twins.
Not two twins. One set of
One
twins.
set of twins. And it's just so lovely to be listened to because they don't.
Wait,
is a
your
glorious
kids
thing.
listen to you?
No, I said it's glorious.
Oh, yeah.
Listen to because my kids do not.
So, but thank you very much for all you do, and we're very proud to have you part of the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.